Welcome. This is a narrated slide deck produced by Outfitters 4, designed to provide an overview of fundraising options in the nonprofit world. However you managed to stumble upon this introduction to fundraising, we're glad you made it. My name is Doug Borwick, and I will be your guide here. I am the CEO and co-founder of Outfitters 4, a consulting and management services organization for the not-for-profit sector. But that's the last commercial you'll hear from me here. This video is, of course, simply a narrated slide deck. Feel free to hit pause on those rare occasions when you see something worth looking at longer. I would hope that there won't be too many instances in which you will be tempted to hit fast forward. So, with that introduction, let's begin. For many, if not most, board members of nonprofit organizations, especially new board members, fundraising is a daunting or even unwelcome prospect, perhaps one a person might wish to avoid. However, a principal responsibility of the board is to ensure the organization has sufficient funds to support carrying out its mission. Fundraising is unavoidable. Fortunately, with a little adjustment of perspective, it becomes much more palatable. First, for 501c3s, fundraising is not a choice. It is the essential fact of life for nonprofit corporations. They exist because, one, paying customers, if any even exist, cannot cover the cost of the public good they provide, and two, because there is insufficient political support for full funding from the government. 501c3s fill this gap. Therefore, fundraising is both inevitable and necessary. Fundraising is not begging. It is a mutually beneficial exchange. 501c3s provide services that funders consider important. Funders provide resources to carry out those services. Fundraising is the means by which nonprofits enable funders to support services that are meaningful to them. Indeed, as a practical matter, a hat-in-hand mentality dooms efforts to, at best, minimal success. The most effective fundraising focuses on mutuality. The ultimate goal of any funding plan is to develop a diverse portfolio made up primarily of renewable funding sources. Overdependence on any one funder, no matter how seemingly dependable, puts the organization at risk. Overdependence on non-renewable sources, like most foundation grants, taxes staff resources since the labor involved in application and reporting processes is considerable. It also leads to uncertainty about the organization's finances, since grant announcements are usually made close to the time the funds are needed. Another important principle is to maximize the percentage of unrestricted funds. Funders have the right to specify the use to which their funds are put. Unfortunately, this limits the organization's options. It's possible to envision a situation in which funding exists in excess of the total amount of an organization's expense budget, but it is unable to cover those expenses because of restrictions on the funding in hand. Securing unrestricted funds is vital to the long-term health of any nonprofit organization. Fundraising is not a standalone activity. It must be bound by and in support of the mission. 501c3s must never let the availability of funding determine what programs are offered. Doing so will force mission drift, and it will almost always take money away from other programs, since virtually no funding source will completely cover a program's costs. An effective means of ensuring appropriate focus is to develop a mission-centered plan and seek funding only for those things included in the plan. Fundraising plans need to be tailored to the types of funding an organization is seeking. The two most critical areas of need are operating expenses and project or program support, although in a minute I'll explain why that is a problematic distinction. Funders rarely earmark money for operations, for example, staffing, rent, supplies, and equipment. Therefore, operating expenses are often supported through unrestricted funds. The most visible part of any nonprofit's work is its projects or programs. As such, they can be attractive to a wide variety of funding sources. While programs can seldom be sustained through grants, grants can be a good source of startup funds. However, the distinction between operating and program expenses is almost entirely artificial. Operating expenses represent the cost of doing business. No organization can deliver its services without the money spent on operations. Every program needs people and the space in which they do their work and materials. To assist in showing the real cost of offering services, nonprofits should use cost allocation in its accounting system, allocating the cost of operations to each of a nonprofit's programs. Face-to-face solicitation is a time-honored means of seeking donations from individuals. Especially in seeking large gifts, the process is intensely personal and time-consuming. From the perspective of the nonprofit organization, it is very labor-intensive and assumes the chief executive officer is able to devote the time necessary for it and has the skills to make it viable. Major donors usually expect the principal staff member and board chair to participate. A less well-known approach is a form of group solicitation. A focus group of potential donors is invited to the home of a board member or benefactor. Appetizers and drinks are served, followed by a presentation about the work of the organization, sharing statistics and success stories. Attendees are then asked for donations or pledges. Such gatherings are commonly referred to as house parties. For those who remember such things, this is sometimes thought of as a fundraising Tupperware party. This has a minimal impact on the resources of the organization, is relatively easy to produce, and serves to raise the visibility of the organization as well as secure funds. In addition, since the individual contributions are relatively small, though collectively significant, the funds are usually unrestricted. Given the ease of establishing online giving opportunities, any nonprofit with a website should, at a minimum, have a Donate Now link of some kind. Email solicitation of funds should be used sparingly because people get burned out on them and rather quickly learn to ignore such appeals. The large majority of an organization's communication should be about the work of the organization, not appealing for funds. That said, email newsletters can certainly contain discrete links to a giving platform. Older modes of communication, such as telephone contact and snail mail, were a vital part of fundraising a generation ago. If using carefully edited lists of donors and supporters, direct mail can still play a significant role. The key is the quality of the lists. They should be updated regularly, adding and deleting names as warranted, and ensuring addresses are current. Whether from government entities, foundations, or corporations, grants provide funders with a means of supporting activities related to their interests without having to produce programs or establish new organizations themselves. Among the general public, there is an awareness of the existence of grants, if not of their nature or uses. This means that they are among the funding modes with which new board members are most familiar. The caveats about grants I've mentioned and that are shown on this slide are numerous. They are usually short-term and non-renewable. They seldom, if ever, fully support whatever purpose for which they are earmarked, and almost always come with considerable restrictions. The application and reporting process is often labor-intensive, out of proportion to the size of the grant or potential grant. Due to this, as well as their unpredictability, they should never be seen as a principal means of funding the organization. At the same time, grants can be a vital means of developing new programs, creating staff positions, supporting capacity building, like planning, marketing, or even fundraising, or, in the case of some social service agencies, supporting a large share of the organization's operations. Grants can form an important part of the total funding stream for a nonprofit. Special events, golf tournaments, silent auctions, 5K runs, etc., represent popular and highly visible fundraising opportunities. They can raise public awareness of an organization and, thus, support for its cause. They are also often popular with board members. However, it is important to weigh the cost of special events. They are resource intensive. Evaluating the income versus expense results of special events often yields surprising and sometimes distressing insights. It's not just the income versus direct expenses that can be eye-opening. Far more common is the realization that the personnel cost of both staff and volunteer time spent planning and managing the event makes the event a significant resource drain. The organization must weigh whether the benefits of the event outweigh the costs. In particular, the opportunity cost of the event, what else might be done with those resources, is a key consideration. Of course, sometimes the marketing impact visibility of a special event outweighs the fact that there is not a significant financial benefit from it. The decision as to the value of the event to the organization is one best made by the staff and board together, taking all factors into consideration. Planned giving is the means of attracting the largest possible donations from individuals via cash, stocks and bonds, or real estate. Often, although not exclusively, thought of as end-of-life gifts, these are usually given through wills, trusts, or insurance policies. Since they require accounting and legal expertise, both the donor and the recipient need specialized accountants and lawyers to guide them through the process. In spite of the potential complexity, most organizations can benefit from providing planned giving opportunities if there are supporters who would consider giving in this way. Even relatively small estate gifts can have a large impact upon a nonprofit. Some nonprofits can earn money from fee-for-service programs or from the sale of mission-related products. We refer to this income as revenue. This possibility varies widely by subsector. For instance, social service organizations have few such opportunities. Educational institutions, healthcare entities, or arts organizations often have more. State laws vary, but in general, the income received is not taxable, although the organization is often required to collect and submit sales and use tax to the state. Unrelated business income, UBI, comes from the sale of services or goods that are not related to the organization's mission. For example, rental of space for weddings or other private use. UBI is fully taxable and cannot exceed a certain percentage of the organization's budget without imperiling its tax-exempt status. Given the complexity of tax law in this category, advice from accountants and/or lawyers with specific expertise is essential. The existence of corporate grants was mentioned earlier. Those provide small-scale support usually and are derived from the corporation's charitable giving budget. In the last generation, another source of corporate support has been developed. Corporate marketing efforts come in the form of sponsorship of programs or special events. Since this money comes from the marketing budget, there is the potential for more money than is the case with corporate charitable giving. Sponsorships come with a variety of strings attached, and the nonprofit should ensure that the nature of the strings and the association with the corporation is appropriate to its mission. However, especially in the case of special event sponsorship, corporate support can cover much or all of the event's associated hard costs, making the bottom line for the event more attractive. Coordinated campaigns aggregate a variety of funding modes for a particular purpose. The most common and probably the most necessary is an annual campaign. It focuses on two key funding principles: diversity of funding modes and renewability. In addition, well-planned campaigns, through special events and annual donations from individuals, generally bring in a high percentage of unrestricted funds. The other category of coordinated campaign is designed to bring in large amounts of funding for either capital projects or endowments. These are highly specialized efforts, usually lasting multiple years, and are best led by advisors with expertise in soliciting large dollar individual donors via outright gifts and planned giving, as well as major corporate grants. And here they all are on one slide. The range of funding options is both impressive and daunting. Each can have a niche in an organization's funding mix, and each has its own time frame and requires particular skills to implement effectively. Board members, through the organization's executive director or CEO, should support the professional staff overseeing each element. The board member's responsibility generally focuses on in-person solicitation and support for special events. Before we leave this slide, it's important to note that few organizations make use of all these sources of funding. Smaller, newer organizations in particular usually emphasize only a few. As with operating versus program expenses, there's a good deal of unreasonable talk about fundraising income to expense ratios. The start of new fundraising efforts and the hiring of staff to increase fundraising capacity can skew such ratios in a given year or two. That said, several well-respected standards of excellence guidelines suggest that over the course of 5 years, there should be at least a 3-to-1 ratio of fundraising income to expenses. While not technically funding, in-kind contributions, when they are for goods or services that the organization truly needs, are an excellent way to stretch the budget. This is especially true since in-kind gifts of products or services do not cost the giver nearly as much as the cash they would need to donate for the organization to buy those things from other parties. Individuals and corporations are the most common sources of such donations, and prospects should be apprised of any particular in-kind needs the organization has as part of any general fundraising appeal. The one very significant caveat about in-kind donations is that there is little control over either the quality or the timing of the donation. Most states require some form of charitable solicitation license before a nonprofit is allowed to solicit contributions in the state. This is one mechanism states use to ensure that nonprofits are held accountable for their fundraising activities. The board should ensure that if the state does require a CSL or the equivalent, it has been secured and renewed as the law demands. Boards of directors are the representatives of the public interest in a 501c3. They are guardians of the public trust as well as of the organization's mission, integrity, and viability. An important part of this responsibility is to be vitally involved in the acquisition of resources to carry out the organization's programs. This responsibility need not be daunting or burdensome. As a reminder, fundraising is the essential fact of life for nonprofit corporations. It is not begging, it is a mutually beneficial exchange. The fundraiser provides donors the opportunities to support services they consider important. If the work of the 501c3 is important to society, ensuring that it has the financial resources to carry out its work is a vital service to the community.